Paul Moneta, and this is the producer Masterclass for Sun Something. In the mid-90s, I spent 4 years in London and got into the party scene there, and the natural progression for me was becoming really interested in the music. I started buying lots of records and eventually started DJing in some underground clubs there. And when I returned to South Africa, I felt it was time to start getting involved in production. I first did a sound engineering course because back then MIDI was the whole rage and something new. And from there I bought my first synth, the Roland Groovebox, the MC505. I started playing around with that. About 5 or 6 years later, I got my second synth, the upgrade to the Roland Groovebox 808, and started to come up with really cool ideas on that. But as I never had any sequencing software where I could lay out my production and see what was going on, I felt I wasn't getting anywhere with it. So it took me about 4 or 5 years of debating whether I had what it took to get involved and start doing tighter productions, and eventually I got myself a Mac, and this was about a year ago, and since then I've just been flying on producing tunes. So the hardware that I'm using, I've got a MacBook Pro, I've got this MIDI keyboard, and I've just recently got a sound card, and then my speakers and amp. It's quite a rudimentary setup. Live instruments, I've got a couple of little bells and whistles that I picked up in South America, which I use for my real job. Usually I just start off with quite a basic drum beat, just something so that I can lay down either bass line or melody off that. And once I've got a melody or bass line that feels like it's something I want to take somewhere, then I start to develop more of the drums or the rhythm side. And once I've got that, I add in a couple of accessories. And once I feel there's enough meat in the track, I then start to lay it out into a full production. And after that, then add little bits and pieces and change where necessary to give it a bit of movement. Then I work a little bit of sound design, adding effects or whatever's necessary to make it a little bit fatter, a little bit tighter, and make it a little bit more unique. At the moment I'm playing quite a lot with the bit crusher, and having quite a lot of fun with the delays and the echoes. With the style that I'm working at or feeling comfortable with at the moment, 2 influences and sounds that I like to mirror or move towards is the XX and Bob Moses, because they're quite musical, it's quite minimal, and it's just personally I feel they're quite beautifully packaged. Okay, so this is part of the track where after the first break, and pretty much everything's in force over here. And what this comprises of, I started off firstly with the MIDI rhythm. I got the groove that I wanted, and then I split it up into a few tracks so that I could work it more easily. And that basically is made up of a kick and a hi-hat, and then some other rhythmic sounds, and another hi-hat kind of rhythm overlay on top. And these days I only really work with MIDI stuff. I don't do any audio samples, but at this point in time I added something, and this was something out of the Logic library. And I was talking about the bit crusher earlier, so if you want to hear this with the bit crusher, that's kind of what it sounds like. Without it, which was the original sound, it was just like a straight up kind of hi-hat and snare with quite a strong reverb, which I also added. Then we got the bass line, which is just also, it's a straight up kind of driving bass line. It's got a bit of a faithless feel to it, which is quite nice and quite upfront. And some of the sounds, the accessories I was talking about, we've got the wave cycles, which now you can't have, there we go, you can hear it there. And the lunar chords. Now these, the lunar chords is one of the arpeggiator sounds on the Logic library, and you can really get carried away with that. So that's it, folks, a bit of background as to how I make my tunes and what gets involved in my productions. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on Bonetown TV.